It is a pleasure to have this chance to have a conversation with you, Tien. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate that. Our names and information is up there, as Joanna mentioned. So really, really excited to have you here. So kind of want to start out, because we've been talking a lot about fundraising, how terrible the whole process is. You've raised over $240 million for Zuora. Zuora IPO'd. You're a successful writer, as well as obviously an entrepreneur. You've done a lot. But it all started back in 2007. We have a picture of you back then here, when you started Zuora. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started Zuora?
So at the time, I was at Salesforce, and I've been there 9 years. And I guess going back to 1999, I toyed with the idea of starting something. It was a little harder then, right? There's no such thing as seed rounds, not a lot of angels. The big hurdle rate was a Series A, which was fairly large. The internet was still new. And just to kind of, people think Salesforce is a foregone conclusion, but when we started Salesforce, most people didn't have high bandwidth to their homes. There's no Wi-Fi in hotels. We were asking salespeople to check in at night, unplug the phone cord, plug it into their compact brick, and do a 56K dial-up modem. And we were trying to make sure all our pages were under 50K, right? Because the internet was slow. And it didn't always work. And so it was just a different environment, very, 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 very different place. So I wound up joining Salesforce instead, foregoing the idea of doing a startup. But fast forward to 2007, Salesforce was approaching $1 billion. And I started getting the itch again. And so one thing led to another, had this idea. And then what I like to do is I like to try to build upon the past. And so to simplify it down, Salesforce is about using the subscription business model to disrupt the software industry. And our question was, gosh, can this happen to all industries? If it can, then let's take the lessons that we had at Salesforce in terms of the software platform that you need to make this work, and let's go try to start a company.
Awesome, that makes sense. And then we've got here you and your co-founders. Can you tell us the story about the name of Zuora and how you guys came about with that?
Well, KV and Chung, the idea for the company actually started in a meeting that KV and I were in with Mark Benioff and Min Tzuo, one of the WebEx co-founders. KV and Chung were from WebEx, and Min was pitching something to Mark Benioff. My desk was outside of Mark's office, so every once in a while Mark would come out and say, hey, come in here. And so I got to see a lot of strange meetings, but one of them was this meeting, and we spent, instead of talking about Min's idea, we wound up spending 3/4 of the meeting just bitching about our billing systems. And so KV had found Chung, got going, and then they kind of looped me in. And at the time, they took their last names. I don't think this story's out there, actually. They took their last names, jumbled it up, and tried to find a 5-letter website. And I looked at it, and it's like, well, Zoura, because Chun's name was Tzuo, Z-O-U, was a travel site. So they reversed the U and the O. And I looked at it, and I was like, well, that's kind of my name, too. So it was a little bit of karma. It says, well, if I join, the story still kind of stays the same. Yeah. And I wound up joining them.
Awesome.
As a co-founder. Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, it's a strange thing.
That's
wasn't
awesome.
Planned.
So you said kind of seed funding was a little bit different back then, right? So how did you approach it? What did you go out doing? Notice obviously Mark Benioff ended up investing as well. How did you guys approach that first round to get started?
That was a really good presentation. At the end, I should have wrote down, the net down at the end in the Q&A was probably really important. The fundraising model is the mental model people have fundraising is all wrong. It doesn't make any sense. The Silicon Valley show of going door to door and asking for money, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I don't know, so Peter Fenton was my Series A investor, and Peter's like this demigod now. But he was just Peter. He was successful at the time, right? But he hadn't had his IPOs, he hadn't had Twitter. He hadn't had all those things yet. And, but I've known Peter now for, probably 14 years. A marriage, right, or a partnership is a better mental model. I mean, you're stuck with these guys. And you hear all these stories of other founders that pick board members or VCs that they hate. And that's not good. I mean, that is a nightmare, right? Because it's hard to divorce your VC, especially when they're a board member, right? And so, it's possible, but it's just hard. And so this is a relationship game. This is more like dating. This is more like, and so that's a better mental model. And so that's why, like, take the time out to get to know these folks. It's the same with them. I mean, they've got a limited set of board seats or investments that they can do, and they're betting their career. And so they need to feel really, really good about you. So this is a relationship building exercise, right? Not a, let me go into the bank and see if I can get a bank loan, and so you just got to take the time out. You got to get the time out to know the community, know the people. And if a VC invests in you, there's always some angle, right? Because if they see, I don't know, 100 deals, 500 deals, whatever it is, why you? Yeah. And there has to be a narrative in their head that says, this feels like the right one for me. As an investor. Why is that? Because probably I can add some value, or I can see something that other people can't, right? And so the relationship winds up being really, really important.
Yeah. For your Series A, do you think you ran a pretty effective process? Like, how was that for you?
Well, the FOMO comment was the other comment. So I started this, I raised my seed round in December 2007.
Was it
A round,
yeah.
Seeds. Probably in 2006. I get an email from this guy, Peter Fenn. That was a Salesforce, right? And he's like, let's grab breakfast. And I was like, well, who's Peter Fenn? So I pinged a bunch of folks. You should probably take that breakfast. All right, I took that breakfast. And it was at the Americano. And he spent an hour just talking to me. And at the end of the hour, he's like, well, that was good. Let's do that again in 6 months. And I left the meeting, breakfast, and it was like, what did this guy want? Like, he didn't ask for anything. He didn't want anything. I thought he wanted, like, to know about some stuff at Salesforce. And that was it. And then literally probably, if I timed it, probably 6 months of the day, I get another ping from him. Let's go to breakfast again. Or maybe it was 3 months, maybe it was 6 months. And so I didn't know what was going on at the time, right? But in hindsight, you can tell what's going on. He wanted to build a relationship, yeah. Right? And so when we finally did the Series A, the relationship was already established.
Okay.
And which helped. Now, you still have to run a process. And there is a FOMO thing that FOMO just drives so much human behavior. And so the way I think about that is, from a process perspective, it is like selling a house, right? There's multiple buyers and there's one property. And so you see the real estate agents, right? They don't take preemptive offers, right? They show the house, they line up demand, and they get a sense of whether the demand is right? Yeah. They get a sense of whether the price is right. And then they light up the process. And so you try to line up as many of these folks as possible, right? And you have a sense of who you like and who you don't like. And then you look for, this is not new, the industry calls it a dark horse, right? You look for somebody to do the first offer. And that sets the motion. If you set it up right, that sets the motion. Because then you start calling other VCs, like, look, no VCs in the room, right? So it's like, because then you start the process, like, so how do you build a relationship if you're not fundraising, right? Don't show them any numbers, right? That's crazy, right? Heck, don't show them a deck. You just build a relationship, tell a story. And if you're a founder, you should like to tell a story, right? Because you're trying to tell your story, you're trying to test your idea. So just go out there and just see it as storytelling, right? Just see it as marketing, evangelism. You want other people to see your idea, to see your vision, right? Keep back what you don't want to tell them, certainly. Don't give them any numbers. And then but I'm not fundraising, right? And then you call them back and you say, well, I wasn't fundraising, but, I got this guy, I got this term sheet, and you seem like, somebody I really, really wanted to work with. And so, look, understand if the timing doesn't work for you, right? And next thing you know, hopefully they're tripping over themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ideal, right? That's what you're trying to create.
Yeah, so did you start thinking about your B even before you kind of completed the A? Because you built that relationship, right? With, I think Benchmark was your Series A.
Yeah.
And your B happened really soon after, actually, the same year. So a couple of months later, was it kind of something that you already had in mind and you already started preparing for before the B even started?
No, our B was probably a little odd. The advantage of having a name in your earlier rounds is it does make the subsequent rounds easier. It's just sort of fact of life. It's tough to know whether these things work or not, right? Mm-hmm. So the signaling effect is really, really powerful in investing. So the B was, we're 4 months in. I mean, we're just starting to have a beta product even, and Peter said, hey, why don't you come in and just give an update to the partnership, and then Gurley piped up at the end and said, well, it seems like you guys are getting some traction. You guys should do your B. And I was like, we still have most of the money from the A, right? Why would we do our B? And they go, we're not sure that the market's going to be there in Q4. I was like, oh. And it turns out to be very prescient, right? So in the summer of 2008, we're like, well, let's go do the B. And it was a terrible time because the VCs, right? The joke that it's semi-retirement, not the younger ones, right? But so many of them are just like out of town, like they're like off of vacations for the summer. So it's not a great time to fundraise, but there's also not a lot of activity. And we got lucky. I mean, we signed our term sheet in August. Lehman Brothers falls. The whole world collapses. Benioff starts calling me and saying, "Get to cash flow break even because there's never going to be any more money." It's 2008, and I was like, I don't have any revenue. How am I going to get the cash flow break even? And we're a little worried that the LPs weren't going to give. I think Shasta was our B, give them the money. But luckily, Shasta's got a good reputation. The LPs were in, and we got the money in September on August valuation. So just got lucky.
Wow, that's awesome. And then, I mean, 15 million Series B, but then you went on to raise, actually, before you even go there, between the A and the B, was there anything that you noticed that was different? Because the B kind of came about because your investors were saying, hey, let's just get this done. And it's a fairly sizable jump in a pretty big round. And for most folks in this room, they're either going from the C to the A or the A to the B. So that jump between the A to the B, do you think there was kind of a big difference for you guys?
There's so many things unique about us. What are the lessons for others? I mean, the timing of the round is important, right? And it's hard to feel, but you're looking for peak timing. So what is peak timing? So what I hear the mistakes are is like, well, let's just show a bunch of numbers, right? If we can get our numbers to a certain place 6 months from now, we'll raise the money then. Maybe, but so you might actually be worse off with the numbers, right? Because it's more the story, it's more the environment, the story, and we were seeing, so there's 4 slides, right? How the world's going to change, why it's inevitable, right? Some traction. Right, and the traction is just a proof point to the broader story.
Yeah, it validates kind of the story you've been telling.
Yeah, and so we had enough traction in terms of like leads and pipeline, and so like, hey, the story's actually working. Look, that people are, like we got 5 customers, and the product's not built yet, but we got 5 customers already, and so that in hindsight was peak timing. We have the opposite too, which is like, oh man, our numbers don't look too good, and how are we going to fundraise? Those are the tougher ones.
Yeah,
right?
how'd you get past that? If you feel like your numbers aren't quite there yet, how did you get past that in those conversations with the VCs?
So it changes the later stage you get, and so you start doing your $30, $50 million. You start doing rounds that are $300, $500 million, $1 billion in valuation, and these investors are looking for a 2x, 3x return. And they want that 2x, 3x. They start putting structure in these things, right? And avoid structure at all costs. But the earlier rounds are binary, right? It's like, I don't know if this thing's gonna work, right? I mean, it's the spreadsheets are there, the B rounds, or sometimes even the C rounds. It's like, okay, so you're $10 million, $20 million. You do a C round, you think, well, can this thing be $250 million, right? Can it be so the narrative they're trying to get their heads, look, this could be $1 billion. But the worst case is $250 million. We'll make 4x our money, right? And it's not too bad, right? And so it tends to be a binary thing. And so the question is just, do they believe this can be a multi-billion-dollar outcome?
Yeah.
And the other thing about fundraising is you got to remember, this is not a one-on-one thing, right? Whoever you're selling to or whoever you're talking to, then has to go back to the partnership. So what are they going to say? Right, because the discipline of and angels are not like that. Right? Angels kind of do what they want, unless your spouse objects. Right, but the discipline, the partnership is to push the person. It's like, well, why this one? Right? Are you sure? Yeah. Right? And they start throwing out all the objections, and it's just a matter of discipline. And so what is that person going to say when he faces down or he or she faces down the partnership? And you got to be able to think that through.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Yeah, so in terms of the overall fundraising, you've raised, like I said, over 240 million. Any overall tips? I mean, we've
400
heard
including IPO.
400 million, including the IPO. You've obviously done it multiple times now, and we've just heard a lot of great tips from Michael Siebel. What do you think about that? What are some tips and tricks you have for the audience here?
That was a really good presentation. I think I just go back to, you hear it like fundraising is not fun. It's distasteful. I mean, if that's the mindset, then it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
And so how do you make fundraising fun? I like fundraising.
Some folks do, but ultimately it's just kind of like it's a process. You just need to run.
I like telling our story, right?
Yeah.
I like telling our story, and I like the practice of telling our story. I like to see what people are saying.
Yeah.
And I like to hear the feedback of where the story doesn't work and where the story works, and that's really what it is. And I think for me, I also liked, I wasn't. Things are a lot more open these days, right? Internet and so on forth. It's probably VC is probably more of a closed environment or an opaque environment back in the '90s, but it was fun for me to go. What is this VC community anyway? Like what makes these guys tick?
Yeah.
Right? And how does it work? And just go understand it. And so you go understand it, you go get to know the people, you get to tell your story. It was fun.
Yeah.
And hopefully when it's time to fundraise, that those elements are now in place.
Awesome. Well, speaking of story, you wrote the story on the subscribed economy, right? The book, Subscribed, why the subscription model will be your company's future and what to do about it. So any kind of key lessons there about what the future of the subscription economy is going to be like?
Gotta read the book. I mean, I could turn this into a half-hour pitch on the book, but what's useful for the crowd?
There are definitely folks who are working on things that are within this economy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, look, I don't think I need to pitch this crowd on the value of subscriptions. You either do that or you go with an advertising business model. And good luck with that. I think for a series, an early stage founder, we get a lot of credit, right? Category creation, right? Storytelling. This guy Andy wrote this blog post about how we got the best deck ever, and we still get a lot of attention from that. So highly appreciative of it. We didn't plan it; it just came out of nowhere. So we get a lot of credit for storytelling. One practice, right? That was in that presentation before. The second thing is, and I probably picked this up from Mark. I like hanging out with journalists. And because I was chief marketing officer at Salesforce, I wound up getting to know a bunch of journalists. And they're quirky guys, right? They're interesting. They're a little cynical, right? But they look at the world, right? A little bit detached, a little bit judgmental. But that's how they do their craft. And so when we came up, we were pitching. And I was like, well, let me call this guy Tom Tolley, who I had met. He's just floating right now, but he was a journalist or something. I gave him the pitch, and I was like, what's my pitch? Well, look, Salesforce, we took the subscription model and disrupted Siebel. But look, Blockbuster, Netflix is kind of doing the same thing, right? DVDs at this time. I look at Zipcar, right? And so Zipcar, GM's kind of the same thing. And so here's kind of what we're thinking, right? And he's like, okay, I got it. And so I was like, all right, what are you going to do? He's like, I don't know. So the next day, he writes a little thing, and he writes disrupting or powering the Netflix economy. That was his headline, right? Because that's what journalists do. They get the story, they figure it out, and the Netflix economy, that's pretty good, right? And so we start using that. Of course, you can't use it publicly because Netflix would get upset. So well, we got to replace the word Netflix with something else. Yeah. And we tried different things, and eventually we just stuck. We got a lot of objections with subscriptions because that's $10 a month, and we're not more than $10 a month. Don't worry about it. And we ran with it. And then even then, it didn't work. We tried subscription economy, it fell flat. So we all right, well, that didn't work. And a year later, we dusted it off and tried it again. Yeah. And I think I forget, maybe Spotify come on the scene, and so there was a little bit more traction then, and people liked it.
But I think that's why they say that you built the category. You've been out there telling the story over and over.
Yeah, the book doesn't come out of nowhere. The book is like 12 years of storytelling.
Yeah.
And you know, and then at some point we're 100, 150 people, and you know, we're storytelling, and then I look at the product marketing material, and we're a B2B enterprise software company, right? And the product marketing material was crap. And so it was like, you know, why don't I just bring on board a journalist? And it took a few tries to find a guy, but my co-author Gabe was a Stanford journalism major. I like to say he was languishing at a luxury travel site, writing like SEO, like little blogs to trigger SEO. And I was like, Gabe, like, you want to waste your life doing that? Like let's talk about this. And so he joined. It took a few, you know, but 5 years into that relationship, it's like, all right, it's time to write the book, right? We got so much stuff and material, so he took 9 months off, and we did the book.
That's awesome. Yeah. We also kind of briefly touched upon the IPO, so that's we got the picture here. Tell us a little bit about this experience. This is kind of the goal for many folks in this room, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, it's an awesome experience. So commit yourself to it or die trying. No, it was pretty cool. My daughter enjoyed it.
It's really awesome.
It's
Did you get to hit the ground?
Well, it's 9:29 in 30 seconds, and there's a new president now, but the blue suit guy. My sales team loved this guy. He was so smooth. He's like, okay, when it's like, you know, when the clock says like 9:30, start ringing the bell. And you know, she's 9, or she was 8, and at like 9:29:50, she can't help herself. Bing! So he's like, the market's gonna crash. And then it was 9:30. She said, no, now do it. She starts doing it. So it was fun. It was an amazing experience. I mean, these guys also, and the NASDAQ guys too, right? They build it up too, and so it is a pretty special experience.
What about that work up to that point? As people are starting to talk about it, as buzz is starting to get built, and you're preparing for this massive day. Any learnings from that? Or just how was that experience for you?
So it was probably a 3-year journey, right? And you're not sure 3 years, but we said, look, we just need to start rebuilding the company with this in mind. So you start beefing up the finance department, all these things. And then for us, 6 months before, there's a board meeting, and it was a weird board meeting because I was like, so guys, should we do it? Should we not do it? And I thought the board would just be like, oh no, we're doing it. And the board was like a little weird, a little ambivalent. And I was like, what? So I finally said, we're going to do this. And they all freed up. And so I think they were looking at me. I didn't realize this at the time. They were looking at me to say, are you committed to it or not? Right? And I was looking at them. And then so as soon as I said, no, I think this is something we should do, all of a sudden, like everybody just, this freeing moment, and then you start picking bankers and all that. It's
kind of similar to what Mike was saying about you running the process. I guess it's the same thing here. You decide when you want to run this process.
It's true. No, it's your company. It's your process, right? We just have these mental structures in our head. It's like the board. Right, and you work for the board, and for these companies, mostly startups in the room, right? So badmouth the professional CEO that gets brought in later on, but it used to be different, right? Probably in the 90s, I think sales distribution was so important. You see a lot of founders, right, get it to some point, and then some professional CEO comes in, but the product, the essence, the vision is so important these days. That you see, yes, there's exceptions, right? Godfrey Sullivan is amazing, right? Frank Lubin did this amazing job. But most of the stories of companies where the founder CEO peters out and they have to bring in a professional CEO, most of those stories don't end well. And so VCs don't really want that to happen, right? Even Sequoia, whose reputation was to do that, they don't really want to do that anymore either. And so it's your company. I mean, they're rooting for you, right? And they bet on you. They didn't bet on the idea. they might say that, but they bet on you.
You can change the idea.
So,
You
yeah.
can kind of pivot away from it too. So
Yeah.
absolutely. But I wanted to give a round of applause and thank Tien, Tzuo once again.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks again.
you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.